More revelations emerge in our investigation into the intractable situation of young people who registered for a skills training program that never materialized and left them unable to secure state grants or employment elsewhere.
Yeah, but ngize. After 2 months, ngize, but ngizothini sengizobona ngakho.
This investigation raises questions about some state incentive schemes worth millions of rands involving some companies who recruit youth for questionable skills and development training programs.
My view is that the ETI should be scrapped based on the evidence we have since it was implemented, but also based on the weakness of the evidence that was presented in order to adopt it.
At this stage, no one has been charged, so we cannot necessarily name the people of interest.
We look at the untold story behind some state-inspired tax incentive schemes for businesses aimed at benefiting unemployed youth and the extent to which some state departments are found wanting when it comes to these companies. Last week, we brought you the story of some Soweto communities who are up in arms after their children were registered for a skills training program which ultimately failed, leaving them registered as employees of various companies without their consent.
I just need my name cleared. Because I've been applying for jobs, not getting interviews, not getting any callbacks. So now you start wondering is it maybe because of the scholarship, or is it just because of the high unemployment rate? So I just need my name cleared.
The controversial scholarship collapsed shortly after its inception, when students complained about, among others, unpaid stipends and alleged irrelevant course content. At the center of the allegations are three people: ANC ward councillors who recruited the students, Mpho Sisedinyane and Dumisane Mdladlaba, and course content creator Dr. Lance Levine. Students were recruited by Sisedinyane's company, KO Juniors, which partnered with Dr. Levine's company, Corporate Training Inc. The parties give different reasons for the collapse of the training.
We gave the report to students to say, this is where we are. We think we will not want to proceed also with this project that has got so many questions, because we don't want to be tomorrow followed with some stories that we don't know what happened. So we immediately also cut our ties right there, and then we'll say up until the TB compliance and Dr. Lance come on board and we engage, we would be able to engage one another.
They said they are registered to other companies that they don't know, and they are not students, they are employees. It was a shock. That's where we started to notice there's something wrong with these companies that came and mislead our communities, saying they are coming to give a black child education or blah, 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 blah. It's all lies. I've never received any money. Hence I've said I was a volunteer. And we were many. It was not only me, we were many.
Dr. Lance Levine claims he had to dissolve the partnership after payment from the initiating company, TB Compliance, wasn't forthcoming, and Sisedinyane allegedly started interrupting classes.
No, he absconded. They confiscated all the guides and content that you were going to supply to the students.
As it so
his ANC people, they literally stopped the students from getting into the venues, and they confiscated all the material.
We also went in search of TB Compliance, which initiated the training program and is allegedly behind listing young people as employed in various companies they have not heard of. Its owner, until recently, Louise Venter, ignored our calls and messages. We were unable to locate TB Compliance at its registered addresses. We later learned it no longer exists, but company records show it's still active with a new director. In the course of our investigation, we discovered that another company, EQ Fin, and its name appeared under some of the students' names as their employer on the records of the Unemployment Insurance Fund. But none of the affected students had heard of it before this. After receiving no answers to our queries from the EQ-FIN employee whose signature is on the students' forms, we visited their offices in Bryanston. We later understood that EQ-FIN is a subsidiary of financial services company Liberty, which facilitated its response. EQ-FIN admits that in February 2021, it entered into an arrangement with two companies, TB Compliance and an entity called SA Educational Tax Incentives. The agreement involved 240 unemployed young people from Gauteng, but it exited the program as it was no longer aligned with their skills development approach. It has now resolved to assist with deregistering the students by providing letters to the UIF stating that they were not their employees. And they are now offering to provide the affected young people with a monetary contribution equivalent to 12 months of the grant. When probed further about their employee's signature on the students' UIF forms, EQ-FIN says it never intended to register them as employees and it's not aware of any of its employees signing UIF forms on its behalf. It's been about 2 years since 27-year-old Sibongile Ngobeni of Zondi in Soweto registered with the controversial TB compliance training course. An unemployed mother of a 10-month-old child, she lives with her mother who is also unemployed.
Mama uyi-breadwinner. Yeah, okwamanje izinto azikho right because imbe ngimsiza. Yeah, mayingaphela lento lena like ngaqhubeka ngimsize futhi.
Sibongile decided to open a fraud case after learning that she was in fact registered as an employee.
Ngirealize mangiya eLabor ngiyoclaim imali yami ye-UIF because bengisebenza esikolweni. Yilapho engithole khona ukuthi angiyasebenza ekubeni vele angisebenzi.
After discovering that she was registered as an employee of two different companies, EQ-FIN and Kranswick Computing, she posted her frustrations on Facebook and alleges that she was later threatened.
Mangifaka ku Facebook ulanza athi hayi ngicela ukuthi uyikhiphe ku Facebook singakhuluma. Yeah, ngikhumbula kahle asho kanjalo. Hayi ngaqhubeka wayibona after 30 minutes still wayibona asitshela ukuthi ngikhiphile lapha yawathi uzongithathela i-debt uzongisa emthethweni. Ngele ngathola ama threats ku Dumisani Mdladla abatshela umama efonini ukuthi ngiyaphapha wayengipostile lento le ngeke ngithola umsebenzi for lokho. Amagama aphuma emlomeni wakhe lawo.
This screen grab shows Dr. Levine promising her a job if she removed her post. Levine denies that his intentions were to silence her as a whistleblower. Despite opening a case in 2021, she remains listed a year later. We accompanied her to the Jablani police station where she went to inquire about the progress of her case. She says she hasn't received any calls from the investigating officer since filing her case.
Ngifisa ama-challenges amaningi because azange ngikhone nokuthola i-350. Bengayitholi i-350 ngiyomsebenzi hayi. Bengingekho lula ukuthi ngiyomaketha ngifuna umsebenzi.
With no resources to follow up on the matter, she now relies on the police to clear her name.
Yeah, busy basa investigate ama company la engiregister ku. Abathe ngize after 2 months ngize but ngizothini sengizobona ngapha.
Even though the students told us that they understood this training to be linked to the services SETA, which the services SETA has denied, we discovered that in fact it was an employment training incentive program. In terms of the Employment Training Incentive Act of 2013, South African businesses are encouraged through tax incentives to employ young people to help reduce the dire unemployment rate in the country. In the Soweto matter, 2 fraud cases involving 10 complainants have been opened, none of which have seen significant progress.
For now, I will have to say that investigation has been quite slow, but there is some amount of work that has been done. There's been companies that have been approached that are taken as companies of interest and people of interest that have been approached. But since this has been brought to the provincial level's attention, we have made it a point that the investigators at a commercial crimes unit who specialize in fraud investigations are taking over the case to ensure that there is a speedy investigation into the matter so that they get to the bottom of what exactly happened.
Brigadier Muridili wouldn't say exactly who or which company is under investigation.
The police have already contacted the department to ensure that what the complainants said, that they have found that they are registered as employees of certain companies. So that had to be confirmed by the police. So at this stage, it has been confirmed. But then, like I said, the investigation now has been taken over by the provincial level and everything will be taken up.
Okokuqala nje mina I'm a community leader. So labantwana, they've tried all the avenues before beza game. So I was their last resort. So uma befika kimi, so I understood ukuthi ithemba labo likimi, hence they've seen me as a community activist ngibasiza abantu before. So ngayithatha nayo upon myself this one ukuthi njengoba sebezame zonke izinto be-exhaustile ama-avenues wabo. So as their only hope, so ngizokwenza sure ukuthi bayasizakala because it pains me so much njalo mangiphuma ekuseni ngidriver la abanye ngibabona babuye emalundeni, abantu engibaziyo ukuthi they are so disciplined, abanye ngibathola bablomile bayaphuza, abanye bayabhema, kuhlangahlangene nje, and then ngase ngiyasondela kakhulu kubo wanting to know ukuthi kwenze njani. The council has called meetings, but none of the meetings in the agenda or in the way forward la uzomuzwa khona ekhuluma ngalento yalabantwana. Instead ukhuluma ngayo lapha khuluma khona kuma corridors, and lento yaba affecta abantwana in the community. As the community leader nakule meeting ebeyikhona la last week ezo address indaba ye Joburg water, ngabe lento ifakile because iyaba concern, and I population yala ewardini lethu 75 if not 80% of the population ye-ward abantu abasha, and lento esikhuluma ngayo it affects the youth. That means the entire ward is affected.
Today, Reverend Mtiani Ngwenya is meeting with some of the students and parents to collate their particulars for submission to the Unemployment Insurance Fund's offices. Following Special Assignments inquiry with the UIF, it has requested the details of the affected students to further investigate and hopefully resolve this matter.
The process is unfolding very well from my expectation, because yesterday we did have a few number of participants that have came, and today the number is promising, and abanye they've lost hope. That's why bathumela abazali babo, abanye they are sending ama particulars about through our WhatsApp, because they think ukuthi no kusho ukuthi sisabizelwa futhi ukuzodlalwa ngathi abantu bakhathele, but laba baphumile siyabonga kakhulu.
Today is the beginning of a new chapter in your life as a young person. Come forward and take it. Thank you very much.
It was all systems go in 2018 when a partnership between government, business, and labor was introduced to make a significant dent on South Africa's youth unemployment. The Youth Employment Initiative, or YES. The YES office says it's a standalone work experience initiative additional to the broad-based Black Empowerment Scorecard, whose incentive agencies use along with other skills or enterprise development initiatives. Although it says it's only 1% of the cases, it seems it too is vulnerable to problems. In November 2021, the SABC's Nguni investigative program, Cutting Edge, profiled the stories of some youth, said to be about 400 in total, in the KwaZulu-Natal province, who were also in limbo after registering for a yes-marketed program under a company called SpaceRes.
Company engingayazi which stated ukuthi banginika an amount of 3,500 rand per month nayo engingayazi.
They also discovered that they were registered as employees of companies that they did not know of and, to date, cannot move forward with their lives.
Umqashi wami wayethi mase yangiregister under uLabor as employee yakhe.
Some of them also opened cases and the matter was reported to the Department of Labor, yet when Special Assignment recently spoke to some of them, no progress had been seen. The Yes office says the SpaceRes program was a new venture creation program not associated with them, but it did ascertain that there was a Yes program with irregularities involving 42 youth, where SpaceRes was the agent for a participating company. It says it held meetings with both SpaceRes and the company that appointed it. That company didn't conclude its requirements for the triple BEE recognition and the youth were released from it. SpaceRes says legislation requires that learners be registered as employees by the sponsoring company of the scholarship for tax and UIF purposes and that learners signed an agreement to that effect. In their programs, learners are furnished with UIF exit forms to submit to the Department of Labor, which has the sole authority to update their employment statuses. The company says if learners are registered under more than one company, it could be because they signed agreements with other providers without informing them. They say upon learning that some haven't been deregistered, they attempted to assist but were told by the Provincial Labour Department that they couldn't assist as the matter was now under investigation. Their subsequent efforts to resolve the matter bore no fruits due to non-cooperation by the Department of Labor. The Department of Labor promised to respond to Special Assignment's request for an update on the said investigation, but failed to do so.
If there is such allegations that other provinces are involved, the provincial head of commercial crime that's leading this investigation will liaise with his counterparts at those provinces to ensure or to check if they have cases with the same modus operandi, so that then it can be discussed as to how they centralize those investigations.
We also sent questions to Kranswick Computing, which appears on the records of some Soweto students, but it has not responded to our emails. The National Treasury, which is the custodian of the ETI Act, has also not replied to our questions. Ultimately, similar to the Employment Tax Initiative or ETI, hundreds of unemployed youth countrywide seem to be abused for state incentives. Earlier this year, the South African Revenue Services announced that it has discovered ETI abuse by 30 companies from which it saved 245 million rand. Recently, the National Treasury also announced an amendment to the ETI Act to prohibit companies from offering training instead of actual employment and unduly claiming tax incentives. The Soweto case was also an ETI scheme that offered training which wasn't seen through. Due to confidential client information, SARS declined to divulge whether any of the mentioned companies benefited from tax incentives despite the failed program.
My view is that the ETI should be scrapped. I've made presentations to Parliament in that regard. My view is that based on the evidence we have since it was implemented, but also based on the weakness of the evidence that was presented in order to adopt it, it hasn't had a meaningful effect on employment. And what that basically means is it's 20 billion rand wasted. And my view is that if this was a subsidy, if it was money that was being directly paid firms, I think we would have seen much more accountability in Parliament than we have. But because it's a tax incentive where firms just claim back tax that they would have paid otherwise, we don't see the level of accountability that we should for that amount of money. So my view is that it should be scrapped, and if that foregone tax revenue is redirected, I think it could be usefully redirected to youth employment schemes where government, whether directly or through the private sector, that actually creates jobs, rather than just providing an incentive for jobs that might have been created anyway. The maximum time period that a firm can claim for a given qualifying worker is 24 months. And so that's also an area of potential criticism, because what it does then is it encourages firms to churn. People make different claims about the objectives. So the overall objective, people say, is creating jobs. But then they say, well, it's about giving young people experience in the labor market. And okay, there is an argument to be made for that, but potentially the structure of the incentive also means that even if you've got a young employee who's maybe doing quite well, the firm's incentive is still to let that person go, because then they can claim the subsidy on the employee they get to replace them. The only guaranteed effect, actually, of this kind of incentive is that it's going to increase the profits of firms. That's the only guaranteed effect, because you're going to get a lot of firms that would have been employing these people anyway, and now the government pays them. But that's not the point of the incentive. The point of the incentive is you want firms to create new jobs that they wouldn't have created anyway. And that's really what we're devoting public funds for. And the problem is that if you look at the evidence that's available since the scheme has been implemented, that evidence doesn't support the claim that firms have actually been creating new jobs. Now, these things are always imperfect. It's hard to prove it for sure one way or another, because how do you define what a new job is anyway? How do you prove that a firm wouldn't have created that? But what we can do as economists is we look at the aggregate data, and we try to figure out what's been going on. So far, my assessment of the evidence is it doesn't support the idea that firms have been creating new jobs. And what that means is that this 20 billion Rand plus tax incentive has basically been going to firms.
Back in Soweto, even though Sibongile knows that until she is deregistered, she can neither access any services nor be employed, she still applies for jobs and educational programs in the hope that one day she will be successful.
Hayi bayimoshile intsha. Besithembele kubo labantu sizitshela ukuthi hayi abantu abazosifaka esizofunda sikhona nathi ukuzimela basifake like isifundele lento esifuna ukuba yiyo, but ekugcineni basimoshele.